special branch, an MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for special branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy podcast, the show which shines a light on the hitherto dark recesses and closed areas of the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, and the geopolitical world that those areas of secrecy encompass. Today, I've got a great guy on the show. I'm going to let him introduce himself, give you his name, tell you what he is, what he does, and to give you an idea of basically why he's on the show. I will say that he's an author, and I'll also say that he, strangely for an author, I think, he also runs a gun establishment in another land. So, without any further ado, I'm going to come in with your nickname. Dids, how are you, my friend?
Hi, Carlton. I'm well, thank you. Yourself?
Very, very well. No complaints whatsoever. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Dids, just tell me a little bit about yourself so the public understand what you are, what you do, how you got to where you are, and all those little bitty things that happen in life.
Okay. My name's Dids Hall. I'm an author. I've been an author for 9 years, say 9 years. Obviously, I started writing before that, but we didn't actually publish anything, I think, until 2012, where I published Nobody Special, which is my first book. I've published one more since then, which is a fantasy, but the one that most people talk about is Nobody Special. And after publishing that book, I decided to do a bit more research, and I became involved with a gun club, and through my research, through learning and doing other bits and pieces, I was offered a job there. I did know a bit about guns beforehand, but I'm now apparently the senior instructor, one of the referees, and we teach people to shoot, basically, and learn about guns and how to use them, when to use them, and other fun bits and pieces like that.
Without giving too much away from the book, can you explain how that connection came about? Because, you know, it sounds as though you wrote a book and then you thought, I'll go into a gun club. But what's the glue that puts those two things together?
I've always been... I tried to pay attention to detail. And after I wrote the book, and I was talking to a friend of mine who was involved with a gun club, and he said, look, you need to come down, you need to see what's going on. And I mean, he knew that I could shoot because he's been a friend for 25 years. And he said, no, come down and, see if you can still do it. And we went, the group of us went and did the course. And it just went on from there. I started asking him questions to make sure that I wasn't putting anything that wouldn't work in the book.
Gotcha.
And
That's the point we're looking for.
It just went on from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So in effect, it was part of your research, or after research, you thought you put the right things in, but then you thought, hey, hold on, let's make sure that this is the case. I don't want to give anything away from the book, so people should get it and read it. But basically, you thought, hang on, is this the case? So you kind of then found a new world for yourself. Is that about right?
Well, yeah, it's little things like I've read a few books recently where someone said we engage the safety on a revolver, and most revolvers don't have safeties.
Correct.
You know, and so as my favorite gun, or one of my favorite guns, was a Sig Sauer.
Mm-hmm.
And after writing that you could hear the safety being engaged, I suddenly thought, is it a safety or is it just a decocker? And we went on from there. You know, I was right in what I put.
Absolutely.
But some people will say it's a decocker, but a decocker is a safety. So, you know, it's half a dozen of one, half a dozen of another, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I shot the Sig Sauer because the Royal Military Police used to utilize that. And I think on one job, I borrowed the equipment. Yeah, in Colombia it was. We didn't use it as a general rule in the branch or in SO1, but I had to get used to that actually, because and we're going a little bit into gun talk now. On what we used to utilize in Special Branch or in SO1, and I say that because Special Branch ended in 2006, and one of the sections that came off of Scotland Yard Special Branch was SO1 Specialist Protection. I was one of the founders of that. Let me make it clear, I didn't want the branch to end because I thought it was a superb organisation and should have stayed. But, you know, hey, people at the top of an organisation make something happen, you got to go with it. So then the idea was, I happened to be on the protection section at the time, and how can we make the best out of this, which is a bad job in my mind. So it was forming this SO1 with others, and I wasn't the official in charge, but I was one of the founders. Because I didn't have the rank of the official in charge, but I was one of the founders, one of the people that put it together. And so we basically moved across with the weapon which we used to have, which was the Glock. And the only safety on the Glock is the trigger. And you know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Basically is don't pull it, right? So that's what it is. But it's a good weapon. It's a good weapon for protection because it's all about speed of shooting. And once you've cocked that weapon, you've racked it back. Obviously it fires quicker, but if you haven't racked, you just pull the trigger, it's gonna go. You know, it's just the way it is. And we utilize that by understanding anyway, and I would suggest this anyway, which I'm going to ask you a question on this, Dids, because it's quite interesting. I'm not going to mention any names, but if I say an actor and I say a dead person, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just saying, how does that happen? Because the first thing you're taught in anything to do with weapons is never basically point a weapon at any person unless you mean to shoot them.
Yeah. There's a couple of things. With the armourer, the official armourer in that case had left, and the gun was handed to him by somebody else who didn't have the title of armourer and therefore didn't follow the protocols. As what I've read, I wasn't involved in it. It was nothing to do with me. But basically, one of the golden rules in the film work is the camera will make it look like you're pointing at someone. You don't point at someone, and you need to be about 2 meters away from them. But there's been loads of conjecture about this, and someone said, why are people still using props? You've got CGI now, and they're just trying to save money. Wow. You know, but no, you never point a loaded firearm at someone unless you're going to shoot them.
Absolutely.
And to be honest, you don't point any firearm at anyone, because you know, unless you verify.
Well, you don't know it's loaded, do you? Not. That's the whole point of it. No. Unless you've actually put the rounds in and you've done the bits with it, you don't know what state it's in. Okay, somebody can tell you the state is this. Yeah,
it's a golden rule, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Always treat the firearm as if it's loaded.
Correct. Correct. And so even if, and this is what I didn't understand for myself, even if you've pointed that weapon at that person, right? How is he shooting that weapon at that person? I'll give away that it's a he, but we all know. How is he shooting that weapon at that person when that person is clearly not in the movie? So this is what I don't understand. If you're filming it, because in the movie you're shooting and you're pointing the weapon at a person and you're shooting them, why would you point it at somebody else and shoot them? That's the bit I can't understand.
Yeah, it's total lack of gun awareness, but the person involved is anti-gun, so therefore probably, as far as I know, wouldn't have taken any gun courses because it wouldn't have interested him.
But he's in 1,000,001 movies, though, hasn't he? In which he's had weapons. 1,000,001 movies in which he's had weapons. And you can't tell me that every time any decent armourer, and this is why I'm asking you, because that's what you are.
Yeah.
You know, if you're an armourer on any of those movies he's done before, the first thing you're going to tell him is first principles, which is don't point that weapon at somebody unless you're going to shoot them.
Yeah, I mean, that's my first rule. In fairness, I worked on a film with somebody else. And the director knew that I worked at the gun club, but the assistant director didn't. So I said, do you want me to do this gun safety course? And they said, well, yes, if you're going to be in a film, you have to do this gun safety course.
Yep.
And one of my students was on the course with me, and he just, he just went, Dids, what the? And I went, no. And he goes, no. He said, you don't need to do this. And I went, listen, you can always learn something, but the guy never told me the first rule is to treat it as if it's loaded. Different armourers do different things. There might have been something lost in translation, but when he didn't say that, he didn't ask me what the 4 golden rules are. I mean, the 4 golden rules.
Which they are. Let the viewers understand.
Okay, the first rule is always treat a firearm as if it's loaded, even if you think it isn't. Until you've checked, you've got to treat it as if it's loaded. Rule number 2 is never point at anything you don't want to kill or destroy. Rule number 3 is don't touch your trigger until you're looking at the target. And rule number 4 is be aware of your target environment. Where is a safe place to point the gun? And to be honest, this incident that's just happened, it's broken all 4 rules.
Well, that's the point, because any course I've ever been on, be it in the Metropolitan Police as part of the branch, in terms of learning protection shooting, or be it surveillance-wise in the Met, or be it in the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, as the initial understanding of what weapons are. Everyone who provided those courses, so in the Met, it's the Met firearms unit and the trainers, and many of them ex-military, but that doesn't make any difference. Or if it's in the service, in SIS, and most of them are ex-special forces guys who are teaching you that. They're not officers, but they teach you the firearms capacity. All of them are saying round about the same. So it doesn't need to be verbatim, but it's just a basic element that those 4 points that you've mentioned are mentioned in whatever format. So again, I question how he's pointed it at a person who isn't even part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, basically, he's just pointed somewhere and not looked. He's broken the rules. If he hasn't had any instructors, you say he's a well-known actor. He's been in loads of movies, but there are armourers and there are armourers. The best armourer or the best training facility that I followed, or I have followed recently, is Taron Tactical. I don't know if we can advertise them, but they're the people that did the training for John Wick with Keanu Reeves.
Yep.
They are absolutely awesome, but he's ex-military, he's ex-competition. Safety is paramount. And you look at the people that have gone through the courses with him, and you can see the people that have paid attention. I've seen a couple of his films, and I'm thinking, well, I know who you trained with, but you weren't listening.
Very good, dude.
it's the downside of becoming an instructor. You critique everything. I'm banned from watching films with people because they know I'll go, well, if he did that, he'd be deaf.
Right, stop, dude. Let's hit on something, because I did recently one in which was the review of season 1, and we just got on to movies. And Dan the man asked me and said, what movie would you say is accurate in terms of secret intelligence, national security, and personal protection ops? And I said, well, I'll just pick one bit of a movie for personal protection, which wasn't anything to do with personal protection. It was the gun usage, and I thought that the usage of a firearm in Collateral, have you seen that?
Yeah, brilliant film.
By Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
I mean, his usage is phenomenal, spot on.
Yeah, that is the training that he did. It was obvious that, but Tom Cruise, he is a phenomenal actor. He does everything. He goes through it and he makes sure that it's perfect. He doesn't want to come across as an idiot, and everything that he does, he's researched fully.
And what I was going to ask you is, who would you kind of put up there from a movie that you've seen that you can suggest to people this is good shooting? That's the shoot.
John Wick. It had to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves. It's obvious that he's done.
Never seen it.
Oh, you've missed out. It is possibly one of the best guns. You'll see a lot of reviews on it, and people going, "Oh, well, it's not possible, and he can't do that." And then you'll see other gunners that do. There's a competition called IPSC in our part of the world.
What's it stand for?
International Practical Shooting. I've forgotten the last word.
Right. Okay. No problems.
It's not a competition.
Right.
I think it's Confederation.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. I always forget that word.
Yeah, that's not. It's just I just wanted to explain it to the people so they could look it up or whatever. But if you can't remember, it's not a problem. Yeah.
No, the thing is, we call it something different over here. And,
right. Okay.
It's another four letters, which I'm not going to go into because it will give away where I am.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, they train and they train 3-gun, which is pistol, carbine, and shotgun. And as you watch John Wick transition between pistol to shotgun or pistol to carbine, it's absolutely awesome, and you know that he's done the training. He is the real deal, and you'll see videos of him appear on YouTube, and he's just so cool. And he isn't, he's not like in your face pro gun. He just thinks that people can have guns if they want them, but they should have training, and there should be checks. I was reading an article about him the other day, and he is just so good in what he does. And he's a great ambassador for shooting.
I think you and I differ a touch because I don't know if you know. I mean, I'm a guy who years back I wrote a paper which took like a 10. No, it wasn't 10. Rubbish. I think it was about a six spread or 5 or 6 page spread in our the Police Review, which is the National Police magazine of the United Kingdom. And basically I said that every police officer in the United Kingdom should carry. I thought we were unprofessional, the fact that we don't. But, and this is the big difference, I'm not a believer in civilians having weapons at all. Frankly, I'd have it like Japan. So that's where you and I differ a bit, because I know you think civilians should have the capacity, but I'm definitely sure that the police should, because and this is actually part of the discussion I want to come into you with. Actually, it's to be quite truthful, because you're an expert on firearms and stuff. What I wanted to do was for your views was a feel as to whether you think police should or should not have firearms, taking into account that 96% of police around the world probably do. The ones that don't are the ones that really can't afford it, or they don't trust their officers to carry them. And I'll explain that clearly. I've worked in China many times, and the regular Chinese police officers, that's regular police, do not carry regularly. they have units, sections that carry, but regularly don't. Now, the reason why that wasn't because they're anti-gun. It was because in the beginning, after the revolution and communism comes about, they can't trust every officer to be so orientated towards the system. They didn't want to have another unit. And the truth of the matter is, that's the reason in the United Kingdom as well. Because when the Metropolitan Police was formed in 1829, most of the ruling elite did not want a police. But, you know, my degree was in this. I did the history of policing as well. Basically, what the ruling elite basically had all their own people who had firearms. So if you were, you know, some lord, lady of a manor or whatever, your retinue basically had weapons to protect you. Right? Not to protect themselves, but to protect you. So, and they had their own weapons, be it a knife or a sword stick or whatever it was, or a gun. You know, they had them themselves. They didn't feel they needed another body to protect themselves because they had their retinue of people to protect them. The lower class people obviously were out and about doing what they were doing, and they didn't particularly want a police to protect them from stealing or whatever else, because they knew they would be the ones who would feel the brunt of it. So it was the sort of, if you will, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, the mercantile classes who were having stuff ripped off them every 2 minutes that wanted a police. But of course, it was, you know, they had the army to do that normally, but the army was always heavy-handed, a la the Peterloo Massacres movie we've seen, if you haven't seen it. The army was always heavy-handed on putting stuff down because they're soldiers and that's what they do. You know, they're there to kill and shoot people. That's what they do. So that's how they did it. So the police, as they perceived them, were a body that came about, what you would call the new police. There's obviously policing functions behind, but never a police the way that it was formed in the Met. I guess you could argue that the Bow Street Runners were a police, and they carried they had a cutlass and sidearm. And definitely the West India Docks were police, had a police. Now, the reason why the West India Docks, because the person who brought this about, Peel, had wealth in the West Indies, and he followed the West India, and they wanted to secure that wealth from people robbing them, normal people, what they called in those days the dangerous classes, and he wanted them to protect against them. So when he formed the original idea of a police, Sir Robert Peel, he wanted them armed like the West India Dock Police, but he couldn't get it through. So he basically gave them truncheons and said, if you need a weapon, you can get one whenever, and it was no restriction on it. And to be truthful, that's basically as it is today. But the restrictions upon it by police leaders. But if the commissioner tomorrow said, I'm going to arm everybody, legally, he could do that. Well, she could do that. She could arm everybody in the Met tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know,
the problem is, Carlton, guns are emotive.
Yes.
A lot of my friends know my views on guns. I am very much pro-gun, as you know.
Yeah.
But when they see a policeman with an MP5 carbine, I've actually heard someone say, "Oh, this copper turned up, and he looked the big man with his big machine gun," and I'm thinking, but it's just a carbine. You know, he you know, if you don't know about it, yes, it's scary. I'm a great believer in education. People should learn about things.
Absolutely.
You know, I walk past guns every day. The police here carry guns. It seems like everyone carries guns, you know. But no, they are such an emotive issue.
Can I just add? And they're not killing each other where you are.
No,
that's what you need to understand. They're not killing each other, and the police aren't going out killing people. Because you always get in the UK, oh, the police will be killing people. Look at America. America is the worst idea of anything. Frankly, I'm going to be absolutely truthful. And I was a detective for it years ago. It is the worst idea of anything, for the pure and simple reason they orientated themselves to have weapons because they stole the land off somebody, and that person whom they stole the land off just didn't want to give it up, quite rightly. So they had to kill those people, right? And that's it. So they armed themselves and give the rights of individuals to do it. And the vast majority of people who went to America were chancers, right? Let's put it as it was in the early days, chancers, often criminals, whatever, or they were enslaved. So the enslaved people want to get away. So what do you do to keep them from getting away? You arm yourself to prevent them, and you shoot them down if they try any actions. So the whole country is built on killing people. I'm not overstressing it, but this is the reality of it. You know, we want to dress it up now as nice, but it's taking another man's land, bringing a lot of folk there who who are enslaved and don't have their own way, so you've got to keep them down. And then for the people who are there, it's take what you can, because once you've got it, nobody asks you how you've got it. That's America. So it's the worst example of gun orientation. You talk about Japan. I mean, the crime level in Japan is so low, it's incredible. I think Singapore's lower, but probably it's incredible. The amount of murders each year, I was looking it up at one stage, and I can remember when years ago, I was doing some studies on it, but even recently, you see that the murder level is like 1 in 100,000, almost 1 in 100,000. It's very, very low. I mean, just to give the stats about that, let me just so it's, so that works out something like 5. Right. So if you look at that homicide level, so it's to give the actual figure, it's probably easy. 2017, it's 307 homicides in Japan. Right.
Right.
In sort of the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, those figures are like 800 people. Right. Taking account Japan's population is twice as much. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got 800 being murdered. Now, when you look at the sort of way that comes out for the United States, guess what the figure was? 2017. I'll give you the figures. 307 in Japan, and that's not just shootings, that's any modus.
Yeah.
Look at Great Britain and Germany, France, all around about the same, 800. What do you think the US figures were?
It's got to be 3,000.
17,284, right? That just tells you what the country's like, right?
Yeah.
17,000, right? With probably about half again the population of Japan. So even if you doubled it, Japan's would only be 6,000 or 600, right? And that's 17,000. Yeah, this is it's a staggering 56 times the figure of Japan. I mean, it's incredible. Right, so don't use the US. And what I was saying about China, they have a police who are armed. They're called the People's Armed Police, the PAP, right? Yeah. And those guys are Communist Party members. They wear the green uniforms as the regular police wear the blue uniforms. They all carry, right? All of them carry.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're against having guns, it's just they're against who they're giving them to. Like when you go to India, where I've been a lot as well, in India, you'll find that certain police have guns, not because they don't want police to have guns, because they can't afford to give everyone a gun. Right?
Yeah.
This is the way it works. Now, why is this important? Because when an action takes place, an armed action takes place. Okay, active shooter. You know what I mean by that. So that's somebody shooting right now. We in the United Kingdom have got one of the best command and control systems to get people to that venue. I mean, really superb. Yeah. Now, there's a downside, people will say, because there's cameras everywhere, and that maybe take away some of your freedom, your libertarian rights. Let's argue it that way. But we have that system. So there's cameras everywhere, and we have good vectoring systems. The senior officer sitting in the control rooms, massive control room in the example, can say, right, we need to get this, this, and this, and this, and this, a unit to that area. Bang. And he can do that. Bang. But you know what the problem is?
Go on.
What armed units do we have? What they call them Trojan units. I'm not giving anything away. What Trojan units do we have? Right. That's the problem. Invariably, there aren't enough. So you're getting masses of unarmed individuals to a venue, and all they can do, what the regulation is for them to do? The regulation is take cover, read for that hide, right? Take cover, radio response, and observe. So in other words, they turn up, loads of police vehicles, loads of police officers, bang, bang. And because a criminal's got a weapon, all they're doing is hiding and reporting it, right? Until an armed unit turns up.
Yeah. So cannon fodder then.
Absolutely. If they try and take any other action, which they're told not to, right?
Yeah.
They're told not to. So that defends the job, because the job then saying, we didn't tell them to commit suicide. But they know that a lot of people say, well, we've got to do something. So officers take it on themselves. Well, we've got to do something. Yeah, see what I mean? So,
yeah.
So that's where the problem lies.
Yeah.
So
go on.
I was just going to argue. What would you say about the police being armed in the United Kingdom?
I don't have a problem with the police being armed. as long as they've all passed the sight checks, they're taught how to shoot properly, and that they get the chance to practice. Because I see a lot of police where I am that don't get the chance to practice. I think they practice 25 rounds every 6 months if they're lucky, and they can't shoot. You know, if someone pointed at me, it's you walking next to me that will probably get hit. And I'm not saying it's that all of the police here are like that, because I deal with police on a daily basis.
Sure.
You know, and some of them are really, really good.
Well,
But
in your
if you're gonna
country
rely-
that you're talking about, let me just clarify.
Yeah.
In your country, there's a local police, not well trained.
Yeah.
And then there's the national forces. I'm not going to give the
Yeah.
national forces away, who are well trained. So that's the big difference, isn't it? And you can be
Well-
talking about the local forces.
Yeah, but I'm talking about some of the nationals as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they don't get the they're armed, they've got the money for the guns, but they don't get the chance to practice.
Right.
You know, I'm regularly I'll walk behind a policeman and go, listen, I know you're qualified, but do you want to get on target quicker? Some say, yeah, I want to learn. Others are a bit, you know, like, no, I'm a policeman, I know what I'm doing, thank you. But when you see people missing a target and you think you rely on a gun for your life, you really need proper training. You know, and I've worked with police, as I said, I work with them on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Some are extremely good, but the ones that have got a gun but they've never really had the training.
Well, they've had the training to get. They've had the initial training. Let's put it that way, because they've been signed off. But what you're saying is the ongoing training is poor, and I don't dissent that at all. But I would argue. I would argue for you in the United Kingdom. Absolutely, that's the point. Yeah. It's a perishable skill. I would argue in the United Kingdom that wouldn't be the case. You know, we're the part of the United Kingdom that carries all the time. Northern Ireland, example. Every officer carries man, woman, no matter what. All carry. Yeah, and the reason why I say man, woman, because originally, of course, they didn't want to arm the women, and they didn't arm the women.
Yeah.
Stupid regulation. But the women quite rightly went to the European Court and said, listen, if it's dangerous for the men, why is it not dangerous for us? You know, where's our health and safety? And that's the argument for any police officer, frankly.
Yeah.
What's my health and safety? Because you're asking me to go to incidents. Right? Any bank hold-up alarm, example, right?
Yeah.
You know that the person robbing that bank has to have a weapon. Otherwise, the person behind the armored glass in the bank is just going to laugh at him.
Yeah.
Right? So they've got to have a weapon, right? So you're sending police to that unarmed. You're effectively, as the senior controller, as not looking after the health and safety of those officers. And if anything happens to them, like it did with the two female officers who were shot dead when they went into a bank, and the bloke, you know, lo and behold, which is the norm, had a weapon, but because he was an American, I guess, unlike his British counterpart, didn't just shoot the gun up in the air. He shot them both and killed them. Right?
Yeah.
Boom. That's it. They're both dead. Now they had nothing to defend himself with, and no tactical awareness going into the bank. See, that's the difference. See, because they're not thinking gun, they're not tactically aware gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, people say that the public aren't armed, because a lot of people talk to me. I get asked this question so much, and they go, because the public aren't armed, then why should the police be? And then you say, well, because there are guns in England.
Absolutely right.
You know, every time I watch a shooting in the UK, and people say, but how does that happen? And you go, well, there are guns there, but they're illegal.
Loads of them.
It's not legal guns generally that kill people. It's the illegal guns, you know. And if you're now going up against illegal guns, you need the training to deal with it.
As they always were, by the way. They always were going up against illegal guns.
Yeah,
This is the difference. People kind of think that, you know, it's worse now than it was. Well, that's not actually necessarily true. In the 70s, the amount of armed robberies over what they used to call over the pavement jobs in the flying squad were way more than they are today, frankly.
Yeah.
And the flying squad, who carried nigh on habitually, put that to an end.
Yeah.
So, it's not something that's new to the United Kingdom. It's just something that people want to turn a blind eye to. The reality
and
is,
they can't.
And they can't.
They can't.
Correct.
No.
They can't, because you can get a gun very, very easily in the UK.
Yeah. I've been offered countless guns, and I just say to people, look, I can buy them legally. And they go, but if you want a deal, and it's like, but why do I want a deal? It's when they're that cheap. And I say that cheap, I did some research before, when I knew I was going to be talking to you. I did some research, and depending on the city, depends on the price of the gun. But it ranges, for a Glock, for instance, in the UK, you can buy one for £5,000, or you can get one for £2,500, depending on where you are.
Right.
But the best bit was, if you buy 10 in a certain city, you can get them for 4,000, not 5,000.
There's a discount.
So, yeah, but you have to buy 10. So you're saving 10 grand, but you're still laying out 40 grand. And this is why a lot of the criminals now don't use guns, because they cost so much, and it's got to be a last resort, because the penalties for using the guns are much higher than they ever used to be. The cost of using the gun, and it has to be a fresh gun, because if you use one that's been used for something else, you're now linked to the previous crime. And if it wasn't you, you're now linked to the armourer that did it. Bearing in mind, as I say, I've worked with a lot of police, so we have these conversations virtually every day.
They do rent them out, though, mate. They do rent them.
Yeah, they do.
So you don't need to buy it. They rent them out. If you're in the know and you're a player, you can hire one. But of course, there's the easier way around that, which they do, which is a little bit dodgy, and you'll know this better, and I come to you on this, is what you'll get is a decommissioned weapon from the East, say, that's got a block in it, and they basically bore the block out and sort it all out, and they are much, much cheaper. What do you think about that?
I know it happens, but because I've got a healthy respect for firearms, I probably wouldn't use one that had been used like that, because if it goes off in your hand, but by going off I mean explodes rather than shoots, then you're going to lose your hand. But it's not just that; it's you could buy antique weapons that aren't decommissioned. I think it's the 38 Smith and Wesson Russian.
Yep.
And you can buy those that haven't been blocked, because they're classed as an antique, and officially you can't get ammo for them. So I did a quick check. My first 4 pages of results was where to get 38 Smith and Wesson Russian ammo.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, this is now a legal gun, but because people are unaware, and again, it's all comes down to training. You think you can't get it, but there are armourers everywhere. But the Glocks are totally illegal. They come back from war zones, or they've been stolen from armies somewhere, or something like that. But the Smith and Wesson, the revolver, they went in, they bought it, and then they got ammo for it, and they used it.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I'm pro gun.
Yeah.
But legal guns, not illegal guns.
But you see, the problem is there's a very difficult demarcation line between legal and illegal, which is why I say the old bill must carry. The police's role, right, is, well, there's 2 roles I would suggest. One is prevention and detection of crime, right?
Yeah.
And the other one is if you will, the capacity to prevent would be the wrong word, it's always already happening, to deal with crime that's actually taking place. Okay. Now, crime's a very big, crime can be a whole load of things, but let's just say armed crime, give you one example, but it could be anything that's actually taking place. So a bank robbery in progress is the role of the police. Terrorism in progress is the role of the police. There's a massive misunderstanding in Britain. But people think that, oh, right, terrorism, it's the army dealing with it, the SAS or the SBS or whatever. No, it's the police. They think, oh, it's MI5 dealing with it, and they'll deal with it. No, because number one, they can't carry, so they're not police. They don't have the authority to carry firearms. So that's not that anyway. 9 times out of 10, okay, you can always get authorities in somewhere, but it's not their role, and they're not trained to do that. Right? It's not anybody else. It's the police's job. So when terrorism actually happens on our streets, and somebody's killing somebody in mass terror, as it happens now, the people who are called and the people who deal with those incidents are the police, right?
Yeah.
And if 98% of your police outside of London are not armed, you're having to wait, right?
Yeah.
So in London, it's probably 94% who are not armed, okay?
Yeah.
Now, if you're in central London, you may have the bad luck of coming up against people like me who just happen to be carrying, and I'm in your vicinity. So remember the action that happened in, Parliament, when the unarmed officer on the gates was killed and stabbed to death. It just happened to be that one of our protection teams, a team that I used to run, one of several I used to run at the time, happened to be there having dropped off the Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Okay? And it was them who dealt with that issue. But it was just pure luck. They could have
because
been
they were trained to.
Yeah.
And
because they had the kit.
Yeah.
And they had the kit.
Yeah.
Because without the kit, you can train people all you want, but if you've got no kit, you're not going to do anything about it. And this guy was meters away from going into the middle of Parliament and stabbing everybody he saw, killing a whole load of MPs, just because he just happened to be there. Lads were well trained, did the job, pulled out, not over the top, did the job they need to do, right? And put the fella down. And that's the point. But without that, this guy would have been running around stabbing people all day long. And this is what people don't understand. Again, let's take the other two guys who are very well known, Adideo and Abi Blair. Those two guys, we had to depend on those guys being nice fellas. Now, I know that sounds silly, but they've basically just chopped up a soldier on the street. Carved his head off. And because they were nice guys, they didn't do the full jihadi bit and say, oh, there's a school there, let's kill everybody in the school. Or there's people walking in the street, let's kill everybody walking in the street. They basically fixated on one fella and killed him. If they'd have wished, they could have killed everybody walking around. Now, the first police, because the command and control is so great, the first police arrived within about 3 minutes of that incident. All they could do is put cordons in. Yeah. It took another 10 minutes for armed units to turn up. Can you imagine the damage that could have been done if those guys wished to kill everybody?
Yeah.
Right? Which is the normal jihadi perspective. Let's just kill everybody there. Right? You shouldn't have to depend on that. You should be able to say, the police who turn up can deal with this incident. But they can't. And that's in the Met even, that's to 94% can't, because they've not got the equipment. Because you're going to have to commit suicide. Yeah. And they're not paid to commit suicide.
No, I agree. As I said earlier, I don't have a problem with the police being armed, and I think they should be armed, but they need to be properly trained and tested.
And they will be in the United Kingdom. Because the other thing you need to understand in the UK is, if you shoot somebody as a police officer, you are going into a court, and you're going into a court for your life, because and I don't care what the score is, they're going to put you on trial, right? And you're going to have to explain why you shot somebody in that split second. I don't care what the background is to it. That's what
I was listening to the other podcast where you said the Americans look after their own.
Yes.
And treat you as if, like, when that spy ran somebody over in England, the Americans whisked her away.
Absolutely.
But you are on your own. That's another issue. I do think you should have more support, but I think everyone should have more support where firearms are involved. If I shot someone in the club, there's no support for me because we're not police.
Correct.
But if I shot someone in the club, it will be because they were robbing the club to get hold of weapons to use for crime, stroke terror, whichever.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be more support. There needs to be, was the person robbing you, did he have a knife or a gun? He had a gun. Did he shoot at you? Yes, I shot back. Because if they're shooting at me, they're shooting at other people.
It's an interesting one, Dids, you see what you're saying there, because to keep the lid on the issue, you do need to be robust. So I've got no problem with people it being robust. I've got no problem with you having to go in front of a court. The way I have the problem is when the system won't attempt to protect you, right?
Yeah.
That it can see what's gone wrong. Yes, you should go in. You should not be able to shoot someone and get away with it. I don't care if you're all bill or not, police or not.
No.
Yeah. So you should have something, but what shouldn't happen is they should be gunning for you to get you. So on one case, the fellow went back 3 times, found innocent, back in, found innocent, back in. And I remember it quite well because at that time we had basically to be a firearms officer in the Met, you had a pink or a blue card, regardless of what unit you worked for in the yard, Scotland Yard, you still had a pink or a blue card because that was your reauthorization. Okay, so you got your authorization, you reauthorized. And in the old days, it was a pink card, and later on it became a blue card. Well, just as a change over from the pink to the blue card, I remember this officer who had shot somebody and killed them. Normal robbery, nothing to do with intelligence or security or anything like that. He'd shot someone and killed them, and they were doing a robbery. There's no doubt about it. They were going over the pavement, as I told you before, armed robbery job, doing the game.
Yeah.
And he shot this guy. Fella died.
Yeah.
And they put him on trial 3 times. And in the end, people said, you know what, we're going to hand our cards in. So you're going to have no armed police.
Yeah.
We're all going to hand our cards.
And it's sort of cut the nose off to spite the face.
Yeah.
Now you're in a position where you've got criminals controlling situations and putting more lives at risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they do, because you see, we have I remember having a German officer at my house on one occasion, and this Crime Watch was on, this years and years ago. Crime Watch was on, and I can remember it. The armed robbery took place on the Bank of India, which was next door to a police station. And the guys who banked there said, we banked in the Bank of India because it was next door to the police station. So we knew it could never be a problem. So we were always very fearful when we got out of our cash and carry shop with a load of money. But when we got to the bank, we were all pretty cool. Yeah. He said, we got to the bank. Next minute, these guys come over the pavement with guns. Give us your weapon. Gives you money. No.
Yeah.
Give us your money. No. Bang. Shot him straight away. Right? Fella goes down. What made me laugh in a strange kind of way is the brother took the money off him and tried to run into the bank, so they shoot at the brother. His brother's left down, but he wanted the money. Anyway, long story short, they got the money. They shot one brother. They're going to shoot the other brother, so he knows he drops the money and does a runner. And they get the money. They get on a motor. They run off, and they got a motorbike parked there in the corner. Well, the shots are heard in the police station, so everybody runs out of the police station, right, to try and get to these armed robbers. Now, in the old days, they used to have guns in police stations. They don't anymore, right? So, because you used to have X amount of what they call AR4, authorized firearms officers. That's not the case anymore. They've leveled that all down, and there's only certain units that have it. So there's no guns sitting in an average police station. So basically, they all run out, no weapons, anything. They run around the corner, and these guys are trying to get their motorbike running, and the motorbike doesn't work. So they're trying to get it running, and there's like 15 cops there. So one fella puts out, shoots a round or two, and the officers hide, quite rightly, because they've got nothing to defend themselves with. And then they finally get the bike running, and they fire off. Now, my German colleague says, I think this is why you have a lot of bank robberies. So, because if you're going to attack a bank outside a German police station, right, you're going to have a problem, right? Because every officer is going to come out, and every officer is carrying, right? Yeah. And every officer is going to have the capacity to deal with you.
Yeah, which, as I said, and some of the ones I know, it's not always a good thing if they've got a firearm in their hand, but at least they've got the capacity
Correct.
to deal with the
Because you
the
cordon
threat.
people off, don't they? You cordon people off. And if you know there's 15, 20 cops, which there was on that job, 15, 20 cops there, who all carry, most people, even lunatics, are going to think, well, I'll put my hands up because I don't want a gunfight with 15, 20 people because I'm going to come out a loser. Right? That's the difference, you see. But in Britain, no, you're the winner. You're always going to be the winner.
Yeah, because there's no...
Because nobody's there to prevent you. You know, they have a system whereby, and I want to change the subject, they have a system whereby in the UK, if a criminal is known to carry, right, and the criminals know this, so I'm not telling them anything, if a criminal is known to carry, they'll say, do not stop the vehicle.
Yeah.
Don't stop
means
it.
Which means they're winning again.
Exactly. He's king of the roost.
Yeah.
And the worst part of that is being king of the roost is he tells others who he's trying to bring into the game. He tells the youngster, when you carry it, you're in charge. See, because what you were saying about prices, and that's absolutely true. It's expensive to get the weapon and some of those. But you see, especially in the drugs game where money is flowing, that means nothing. That money you're talking about.
Yeah.
Money's flowing.
Yeah. I mean, for I suppose for a successful criminal, like $5,000 is nothing for a gun. I suppose I just I must have come across some of the slightly less wealthy, less affluent ones, should we say? The classic. Someone walked into me and said, "I'll give you $1,000 for your gun now," and I went, "No, you won't."
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone afterwards, and the policeman, as it stands, and because he was behind me, the guy didn't know that he was a policeman.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "This gun is registered to me." He said, "Yeah, it doesn't matter." I said, "Yes, it does, because if it's in my name, you know, how do I explain that I don't have it anymore?"
Yeah.
You know, and they some of the people that I've come across aren't always that clued up, should we say? Yeah, it's up to you whether you use that bit in the podcast.
No, I'm going to use it as it is, my friend. I'm not cutting anything. That's it,
fair play.
But you see, the thing is, you're in a different land. You're in a different land with a different perspective on weapons and the way that weapons are. But nevertheless, even in that land, the crime is not as high as it is in the United Kingdom.
No.
You know, you just got to look at reality. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, and as you say, it's you got 3, maybe 4 different forces, and you've got mixed forces now that are coming in for elite stuff.
Units.
And they all carry guns.
Absolutely.
Good or bad, they carry guns, which is a deterrent. Which brings me back to my point before. This policeman turned up at the airport, with his hands on his big machine gun, his MP5. You know, and it's a deterrent to some people. And I suppose if that's what it's got to be, that's what it's got to be.
I mean, you know, sometimes what happens is the police officer in Britain looks more aggressive than the police officer in other countries because he doesn't have a weapon. Yeah. Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So he's got body armor, he's got pepper spray, he's got this, he's got that. He or she has got all this kit around them, right? And the bigger problem, and many people might not understand this, if you are, I gave some talks in Austria once, and I was giving it to some Austrian officers. I speak their lingo. And I was giving it to some Austrian female officers who hadn't joined the police that long because they didn't have women in what they call the Schutzpolizei, which is basically protective police, which we all know is uniform. They had women in the CID, had them forever, right? Which they call Kripo, Kriminalpolizei. So they had them in the thing, but they didn't have them in uniform. Reasoning being that, you know, you needed a bloke who could deal with the issue. It was their perspective. That's their gender issue. But anyway, they don't put women in. So the woman said to me, is it true that in the United Kingdom that female officers don't carry weapons? I said, well, no. practically all officers, male or female, don't carry weapons. He said, right, okay, so how do you apprehend criminals? Right?
With luck.
So I said, well, just the way one would do. He said, so how does a female like me, 5 foot, whatever, he said in meters, stop, so I meet a big 6'6" guy. I said, well, they basically try and ask, and so they must patrol with men then. I said, no, they patrol, what, with 3 or 4 women then? No, they patrol by themselves like some people do. I can't see that working. He said, how does that work? Because I know, she said, I've got my pepper spray and I've got my sidearm, right? And, I put my hand on my weapon and he knows that I've got the capacity to deal with it. Well, in the UK, the pepper spray is not pepper, so it's not as effective. But they haven't got that sidearm to deal with that issue, right? So I said, it's just so they get beaten up a lot. I said, well, actually, they often do, as do men get beaten up quite a lot, because it becomes violent. It becomes you against me, my strength against your strength. Can I beat you? If I'm a boxer and you're just a normal police officer, I think I can take you. So we're fighting. Whereas in most other forces, you're not fighting the police for the pure and simple reason they're not going to let you get to fight them. And the mentality isn't that you're not going to let you get to fight them because you're going to hold them off because you've got their weapon, right? Yeah. And they're going to stand you up against that wall. But in Britain, you have to lay hands on people. And the moment you have to lay hands on people to arrest them is the moment you're getting into fights. So there's a lot more assaults on police than there is in many other places.
Yeah. No, I was part of a conversation with a group that had, they were doing a convention with some American colleagues and they were watching films and the Americans were going, we'd have shot him by now. We'd have shot him by now. We'd have shot him by now. But the UK police were talking the guys down. They were getting hit.
Which is great.
That's why I'm a great advocate for training.
I've seen the same talking down in Austria. I've seen the same talking down in Australia. I've seen the same talking down in Canada. I've seen the same talking down in Japan. I've seen the same talking down in, all carry, but they're talking the people down. It's that the American problem, to my mind, is what I call John Wayne policing. Right? Do as I say. Do as I say.
Yeah.
Really macho John Wayne policing. There's a few other countries like that. Yeah, machismo. Yeah, you can see it in Mexico. Yeah, you could see that same thing. Yeah, in Mexico. It's there's other countries like that, but generally the US is the king of that. Rephrase. What I would say, it isn't in every force. When I worked for them with the military, I found that the military were often pretty good, actually, at not resorting straight away to firearm.
Yeah.
The FBI, pretty good at not resorting straight away to firearms.
Yeah. Again, that comes down to training, though, doesn't it?
Exactly. Comes down to training. Comes down to the capacity of training. Because what you've got to realize, they've got like 20,000 different police forces in the US.
Yeah.
Some of them are 2 men and a dog. And it's you've seen that movie Live and Let Die. It's like that. What's he called? Sheriff, whatever he's called. I've what we saw.
Yeah. I remember that one.
I was in Texas once, and I swear to you, it must have been his son, Sheriff, whatever he was called. He was policing in 1976, type of thing. I was doing a security job, the national security job, and he was saying, "Oh, this is how we deal with it," type of thing. But that was his mentality. It's a small little police force, small little force off and about in Texas. But so there's good practice in the US in some places. Don't get me wrong. I'm not calling down all of it. There's good practice, but one of the things they need to stop is this macho perspective. But maybe it's gone too far. Maybe now it's at a level where they're frightened that who they come up against is just going to shoot them.
Especially with some of the weapons on the market over there. I can understand that.
Because you're allowing weapons to everybody. So, you openly, I was in Illinois once, and they were saying that, we can have a machine gun here. I mean, what?
Yeah.
You're Joe Soap. How does that work? You know,
But
I mean, you can have a machine.
Chicago is one of the most heavily policed gun states, and there's still gun crime in Chicago.
Absolutely, because it all comes from outside.
Yeah, you know.
Once you've got that, where in other states, you know, I was in Georgia, example, and there's folk walking around with a pistol on the side. They're not all Bill, and they're walking around in their everyday duties. They're not police. They're walking around in their everyday duties. Sorry, all Bill means police to the non-initiated who are listening. But they're walking around in their everyday life. You know, they're a bank teller or whatever. Same was in Texas. This guy's just walking around, open carriage. I say, is this a police? No, he's not police. He's just Joe Soap, just a guy.
Yeah,
You know?
AR-15.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, this is lunacy, to my mind. Now, you will have a different perspective. What's your perspective on that, Did?
Again, I'm wary of people that I don't know and I don't know have had the training. I watched someone dismantle a semi-automatic shotgun and bring it in pieces for me to fix as it stands. But when you're taking a shotgun out the back of a car, it should be in a case over here. And this one wasn't. And we were having a chat about it. And a colleague of mine said, no, Did, you really need to take this to the workshop because he's playing with a dismantled shotgun in public. And I'm like, yeah. And I was trying to get the guy because I was saying to the guy, look, you know, we need to move this. He said, yeah, but it's this and it's this. I'm like, no, we need to move. And then, yeah, my colleague came over and said, no, Did you? And he said it to the guy. He said, you really need to get this gun out of this particular place and put it in the workshop. And it was a legal gun. It's just that he'd broken it and he didn't know what he was doing. And he asked me to fix it. And he just brought it in pieces. So it was like a jigsaw puzzle. We had to put it back together. And I said, are you sure you've got all the bits? And he went, yeah. The upshot of this was 2 months later, he came back and goes, since you fixed it, it hasn't worked properly. And I went, did you give me all the bits? And he said, yeah. And he checked his car. Apologies if you're listening to this. I'm not going to mention your name, but you know it's true. But anyway, and then he goes, oh yeah, and he said he brought the bag in this time, the gun case, and he said, and this has shrunk because the gun doesn't fit anymore. And I went, sorry? I went, give me your bag. And he gave me the bag, and the bit that was missing was at the end of the bag, stopping the gun and going in the bag. And I told him, I said, I think you're missing a bit. Obviously now thinks I'm wonderful because I fixed it. But this is the whole thing. He took a gun out of its case in pieces. Anyone, you know, from a distance, anyone sees it and thinks, well, that's a gun, you know, and they're thinking, why has he got it in the car park? And if they don't know he's walking into the gun shop, you know, they're terrified.
Absolutely.
Apologies, I didn't want to run on because I know you've got to wrap the show up.
Yeah. No, Diz, listen, we're here to listen to you, my friend. Unfortunately, you're absolutely right. We're coming to an end. So it's been fantastic. I think we've only touched the surface of this, so I think we're going to come back on it because I think it's a big subject in the UK, particularly. And I know the listeners are all from all around the world, but in the UK, it's a very big issue that somehow we are policing by consent by not having a weapon. Well, let me tell you, nobody polices by consent like police, say, in Austria, who are so loved outside the cities, that they're some of the mayors of the villages. You know, so they police totally by consent. You can see that in Spain as well, where your police sit down and are utterly members of the society. So this policing by consent, it's a nonsense. Most police by consent. You know, in China, they police by consent. They police by consent. Frankly, it's practically everywhere because otherwise you won't be able to control the masses. It's as simple as that. So we need to get over that, get past this. Having a gun doesn't mean you do not police by consent, because you're not telling me Australia is not a place that doesn't police by consent.
No. And a lot of them are armed as well, aren't they?
All of them in Aussie. New Zealand not, but in Aussie, all of them.
Yeah. in
New Zealand not now, but they've armed many more since that incident they had in New Zealand recently. But Australia, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
They've got IPSC in Australia, which means that some of the public have got guns, but you have to jump through hoops to get them.
Massive
and be a
hoops,
member of a club.
quite rightly.
Yeah,
quite rightly. Since an atrocity they had back about 20 years back.
Yeah. Confederation was the word I was looking for.
Top man,
Practical
top man.
Shooting Confederation.
Right, mate. I'll keep going if I don't stop you. I'll keep going because it's so interesting. Dids, anything you want to ask me, my friend? Because we're going to have to wrap it. And I'm not going to cut any out of this, mate, because it's all there. So we're going to have to call it.
Fair play. You've talked a lot about the branch being dismantled.
Yes.
What body has taken over their role, or has it been shared between other bodies?
Right.
Or can you not say?
I can say. Yeah. The Scotland Yard Special Branch, read for that, the Metropolitan Police Special Branch, which was basically the first and the only professional special branch. What I mean by that is you passed all the examinations, you got vetted to the highest degree, so you could see the highest secrets in the land, and they took very, very few people in, but because of that, very, very few people left at the other side, and hence you basically, once you were in, unless you wanted to leave at some stage, you're in for the rest of your life. So you'd have like 1,000 apply, 1,500 apply, and they'd take 10. That body was split up into many different factions, and officers would move around those factions within the branch. Now, what they did is to try and cover some of those elements, is they brought out basically 3 bodies. So the ports section became part of the border force in a sense. Okay.
Right.
So whereas before, the SB officers at port, who were part of special branch, Metropolitan Special Branch, and were looking at Heathrow or at Waterloo or wherever else, those officers now are border force. So whereas in the past you'd be looking at them from an intelligence perspective, solely intelligence, solely countering terror, countering espionage, that's obviously been watered down because you're now part of a different force, right? So that's that.
Yeah.
So that's the port section of the branch. And taking into account that officers moved around, so there's a massive amount of expertise that you gain by moving around over your 25, 28 years in the branch, depending on when you joined. The protection section of the branch was called A Squad. That went to SO1, which I told you earlier on, and I was part of, because I just happened to be on the protection section when it ended. So wherever you were when the music stopped playing, when the branch was disbanded, wherever you were is where you stayed. So you had to so that section then, which was responsible for the protection of our more senior cabinet ministers, Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary, etc., and any visiting head of state, head of government, Foreign Secretary, or person at threat from political offences, a la Simon Rushdie, all of that went into SO1 Specialist Protection. Okay, so that's its own unit, which came together under royalty, with royalty protection, which was always a different unit, a uniform unit, effectively, but they weren't in uniform, obviously, but a different unit. Because, again, the primary element of those special branch officers on protection was intelligence gathering as well. Okay, because they're intelligence officers. So the next bit now, the biggest chunk, went into something called SO15, which they then called the Counter-Terrorism Command. Okay, now the problem with that is because they called it the Counter-Terrorism Command, it focused massively on countering terrorism, but not the other traditional parts of the branch: counter-subversion, counter-proliferation, counter-espionage. Albeit that when they had this case recently with the British guy in Germany who was just been arrested, it was SO1, Counter-Terrorism Command, that dealt, SO15, the Counter-Terrorism Command, that dealt with that issue. But the expertise was to some extent lost. Now, the reason why they say that's okay is because the security service, which you'll know better as MI5, took on some of the roles more from the branch, but it could never take on the roles because they're not police, so they don't have those powers. In many lands, including the land you're in, the security service, which we call in Britain MI5, security service, is a police body because they need the police powers to carry out the actions. Whereas in Britain, it was between the security service and the special branch, and now between the security service and SL15. But the intelligence gathering capacity of 15 is nowhere near what it used to be because the guys and gals in it are not lifers in it. See what I'm saying? They're not in it for life. So there's a deficit on that process. And there are other issues which are not the security service business, say animal rights example, public disorder example, which is under 15, but still does not have the expertise of what the branch would have had because you're not in it for longevity. You don't know the faces. You're not looking at how this attacks what was known as the Queen's Peace, i.e. the equilibrium of the United Kingdom. So it's a massive deficit. And it's negative.
It needs to be addressed.
It won't be, mate. It won't be, mate. It won't be. It won't come back. I'm telling you now, it won't be addressed.
Okay.
It won't come back.
Fair enough.
So, because too many people had a vested interest in it. One for sure, the security service. Now they don't want to bring something back up. What, as I said in the last episode, the reason why the security service wanted rid is because, of course, the branch was a threat to them once the Soviet Union died.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because then they didn't have a single enemy to look at, the Cold War. So people were saying, well, why do we need this security service thing? When in other countries, the equivalent of the special branch carry that role out. Why do we need this security service? Yeah. That's a massive threat. So they will stymie that all day long, mate. All day long.
No.
So that's it, Dids. Thank you for that last question. I'm having you back because there's 1,001 issues. I mean, if you want to come back, there's 1,001 issues that that I want to pick up on, your military side, which I wanted to pick up on, that we haven't even touched on. We just focused on, which I think is an issue that needs to be dealt with now, which is the arming of the police. If nothing else, because I don't think officers can do their job. I think we're amongst the best in the world at investigative work. I think they put a lot of effort into it, superbly done. But in the protective element, if somebody's got a weapon, that could be a knife, it could be an axe, it could be a sword. Once it comes to a weaponed individual, I think we're very poor because I don't think we can do it.
It's better to have a gun and not need it than need a gun and not have it.
Correct.
In the police's case.
Yes, correct.
I know you're not a fan of the civilians having that mentality, but
not at all. I'm not at all a fan of that.
If you're policing, especially in these times, it's better to have and not need and not use, but to be trained.
Absolutely. And I'm totally not with you on training. And we did a lot of training, and I'm sure that they would, have a lesser standard maybe because we're trained to the standard of special weapons and tactics element, but a good standard of training is possible, as you see in Northern Ireland. And I say this because I fear another event from terror of any persuasion, and the police losing more people than necessary because they can't deal with it. And that already happened. It's been hidden from London Bridge and in other places, and I'm shining the light on that. It's been hidden. People didn't need to die. Right? If everybody was carrying, because police were there very quickly, but because they don't carry, they couldn't do anything. So it's been hidden. And I fear it's going to happen again.
Yeah, I think we agree on that.
So we'll leave on agreement, my friend. Dids, thank you very much for your time. We've gone over. Ill discipline on my side. But thanks a lot, mate. That's fantastic. And for all you listeners, what a great guy he is. I'm not going to say where he is, what country he's in, whatever, but he's a great guy, knows what he's doing. He and I differ on civilians having equipment. I believe definitely not. He differently. But, the man is knowledgeable. If you want to read your man's book, it was, say it again, Dids.
nobody special.
There we go. Get his book. If you want to know more about my life, get my book. It's called, which is my memoir rather than a book like Did's. I'm not a real author like he is. My book is Black Ops, Incredible True Story of a British Secret Agent. So having said all of that, thank you very much. Thank you, Dids. See you again next time.
You're more than welcome. Yeah, chat soon, mate.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I would remember